You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and there's a lot to get to today. No trifecta because there's a lot of New York sports news to get to and some miscellaneous NFL news along with the Jim Sumner interview. But I gotta start with the stupidity that is the New York Jets. You all knew I wanted Robbie Anderson back. You don't need me to tell you how important he is to Sam Darnold. Robbie Anderson is not a great player by any stretch. Alright, he's never had a 1,000-yard season. No one's going to be mistaking him for Jerry Rice anytime soon. But he's the best pass catcher that Sam Darnold has ever known. Keeping him around was essential to Darnold's development. Instead, the Jets decided they knew better. Let him go to Carolina. Hey, Giants fans, I now know how you feel. Losing a guy who you wanted to Carolina. Unreal. There is no way to sugarcoat it. This is a gargantuan loss for the Jets. Not because of the player that Robbie Anderson is. Okay, again, he's not great. But look at that wide receiver core now with Sam Darnold, a guy who we all know needs help. Brashad Perriman, Jamison Crowder, Quincy Enunwa, Vincent Smith, and Braxton Berrios. That's probably the worst wide receiver group in the NFL. Only the Jets could have a young quarterback who they're supposedly really high on. I don't know if they are anymore. They're not putting him in a position to succeed. I gotta say, I feel bad for Darnold. I really do. I don't see how he has a good year next year. Only the Jets could put him in this position. No other team. The Browns surrounded Baker Mayfield with Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and David Njoku. And then this offseason they added Austin Hooper and Jack Conklin. The Bills traded a first-round pick for Stephon Diggs. The Ravens reinvented their whole offense around their young quarterback. What did the Jets do? They let the best pass catcher they had last year walk. And it's not like he got some gargantuan deal. 2 years, $20 million! How did the Jets not match that? How did they not exceed it? This is a team with over $36 million in cap space. The second most in the NFL. And they see their guy, their homegrown guy, an undrafted free agent who no one had ever heard of. The Jets find him off the scrap heap. They develop him into a very good wide receiver. And then when he earns his big boy contract, they let him walk. Finding these diamonds in the rough never happens for the Jets. Only the Jets could develop this guy and then let him walk for nothing. It's funny. At the trade deadline last year, I wanted Robbie Anderson gone. Because I thought the Jets weren't going to bring him back and I didn't want to lose him for nothing. Looking pretty smart right about now. $36 million just sitting there. Let me tell you, Joe Douglas is no better than John Idzik. None. Some people were saying I was too hard on him. Ha! What has this guy done? Fine, he fleeces the Giants in the Leonard Williams trade. Whoop-de-frickin-do. Spends $8 million to lure Ryan Khalil out of retirement. How does that work? Gives over $9 million a year to George Fant. George frickin' Fant! What did he do to earn that contract? Nothing! Gives Alex Lewis $6 million a year. Unreal. What on God's green earth has Alex Lewis done to earn that contract? You want to tell me there's a plan in place? Oh, Jacob, he's executing his plan. He's executing his vision. Why do you have faith in his plan? What makes you think this is going to work? You don't think John Idzik had a plan? You don't think Mike McCagnon had a plan? Look, I understand not wanting to overpay for subpar players, but Robbie Anderson is not a subpar player. I mean, for goodness sake, the Jets whiffed on every single one of their first choices in free agency this year. If that doesn't give you cause for concern, I don't know what does. Oh, and this is the best part. I hate these people. Seriously. The people saying that this is Adam Gase's fault, no one wants to play for Gase. What sources do you have to tell you that? Tell me one reputable NFL insider that has said that free agents do not want to play for Adam Gase. A coach who had Luke Falk as his quarterback for 2.5 games. And the worst offensive line in the NFL last year, or close to it, and somehow led his team to a 7-9 record. I'd want to play for him. I like Adam Gase. I've been very consistent in saying that. You know, I got news for you. Joe Douglas is the general manager of this team. It's not Gase. You want to tell me that Douglas and Gase are joined at the hip and they're co-GMs? Okay, fine. You can tell me that. But I'm sure that Adam Gase wants good football players. How can he not? This guy was getting killed left, right, and center. He's a smart guy. He knows that he needs to bring in better football players to help lead the Jets to a better record and get people off his back. That does mean something to him. He doesn't like criticism. And going back to the notion that Gase is really behind all this, do you really think that he's not willing to give these guys long-term deals? Use your noodle here. You really think that Adam Gase doesn't want these guys back? Guys like Brian Poole, Jordan Jenkins, Robbie Anderson, even a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, you don't think he'd welcome them in with open arms long term? There was a report that came out that said that Robbie Anderson only got a 1-year offer from the Jets. That was it. They never went higher. How does that make any sense? How can you put that on Adam Gase? Adam Gase is the head coach. He is not general manager. Does he have a lot of say in personnel decisions? I'm sure he does. But he's not the one talking to these free agents. He's not the one talking to their agents. It's Joe Douglas. He's the general manager. This was Douglas's plan. Patience. That's not Gase. Gase is a guy who wants to contend every year. What about Adam Gase makes you think he's patient? You know, earlier I said that the Jets aren't putting Darnold in a good position here. And there are a lot of people that agree with me there. But a lot of the people saying that are the ones that are willing to fire Gase tomorrow. Well, no. If your point is the Jets aren't putting Sam Darnold in a good position here, then that applies to Adam Gase too. At the end of the day, a coach can only do so much with his roster. Talent wins over scheme in the NFL. Do I really need to tell you all the teams in NFL history that have had great players on their roster but lousy coaches? And those teams have done well? Peyton Manning's teams with Jim Caldwell. The Atlanta Falcons, when they lost to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Dan Quinn is not a good head coach. You want me to keep going? At the end of the day, there's only so much a guy like Gase can do with the talent on his roster. There's only so much that Greg Williams can do with his defense. If your point is that guys like Gase and Greg Williams should be able to win regardless of the talent on their roster, then let's blow the whole team up. Trade Darnold, trade Bell, trade Adams, trade every good player the Jets have. Let's get the worst players in the league, put them all on the Jets, and by your logic, they should be a playoff team. If your point is scheme wins over talent, shouldn't matter how good the players are. It's all about scheme. It's all about the coach, right? Newsflash, idiot. There's really only so much a coach can do. I feel sorry for Darnold, and I feel sorry for Gase. Joe Douglas has not helped either one of them. Look, if you want to tell me that there's a plan in place with Douglas, that's fine. Look, I believe that he did not look to be competitive this coming season. I believe that. He's looking to the year after. I agree with that. I've seen that a lot on Jets Twitter. I'm with you there. But that doesn't mean that it's a good plan. That's what you're missing here. What makes you think that's gonna work? Can you give me one good reason why a team that finished 7-9 last year, that went 6-2 in their last 8, that saw the best player in NFL history leave their division, can you give me one reason why that team can't make the playoffs? Or at the very least have a winning record? Hey, if the Jets go 9-7 and miss the playoffs, you know, there's only so much that I could be upset about there. There's no shame in that. Especially when they haven't finished with a winning record since Bowles and McCagnon's first year. I'll take that, but good luck finishing 9-7 now. The way that schedule's shaking out, they're going to be lucky to get 5 wins. And even then, that seems generous. Only the Jets could look at this golden opportunity that everyone else on Earth sees is in front of them and say, yeah, no, we're fine. We'll wait. We're looking to 2021. How does that make any sense? How can you get behind that plan? It doesn't matter if you think that Joe Douglas has a plan. I agree with you there. What you need to do is think to yourself, is that a good plan? I don't think it is. If you think it is, God bless you. I'd love to know why. Tweet at me at RealJacobVolk. But I don't see any difference between this guy and Idzik. Keep in mind, John Idzik, gobs and gobs of cap space, did nothing with it, looked to build through the draft, and the Jets fell flat. They only went 4-12 his second year. If you can't see the similarities, then I can't help you. You want to tell me that Joe Douglas is going to be a better drafter than John Idzik? That's fine. That's not a high bar to clear, but okay. Let's say that Joe Douglas really is a good drafter. He's going to draft well. How good do you think those draft picks are going to be right away? We're not talking about guys like Joe Burrow or Chase Young or Jeff Okuda or Isaiah Simmons. We're talking about guys like C.J. Henderson, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Andrew Thomas. Not fantastic players. And I gotta tell you right now, I wouldn't take a wide receiver at 11. You can get better value later in this draft. Speaking of wide receivers, and I've gone on for way too long, let me hit on Brashad Perriman, and then that'll be it. I didn't think I'd go this far down the Jets rabbit hole. I'm going to do that on Tuesday because I'm going to be talking to one of my best friends, Dominic Arbolino, about him. I know he probably disagrees with every word I said. It's going to get heated. You're not going to want to miss it. I'll tell you right now, it's going to be really fun. Perriman looked like he was going to be a bust before last year, and even through the first half of last year, he looked like he was going to be a bust. But second half, he turned it on. Him and Winston actually had some good chemistry there. He finished the season with 36 catches for 645 yards. That's not that impressive, but his yards per catch were 17.9. And he had 6 touchdowns on those 36 catches. That means that a sixth of his catches went for touchdowns. That's really impressive. Perriman's a fine player. He's a good backup plan. I don't mind the Jets pivoting to him. I just mind the fact that they lost Robbie Anderson. Now, granted, I'm a little concerned with how Robbie Anderson is going to do in Carolina. Teddy Bridgewater does not have a great arm, and Robbie Anderson is best when he's a deep threat. I understand that Anderson played under Matt Rule at Temple, and you get the sense that Rule will be able to get the most out of Anderson's route running ability, which has improved. He's still not a great route runner, but it's better than it was. I'm just a little concerned with the fit there. It's not an A+ fit to me. It's a B+ fit. And Perriman makes sense for the Jets. No complaints with him. I just prefer Robbie Anderson. Okay. Enough about the Jets. For now, anyway. On to Noah Syndergaard needing Tommy John surgery. And only the Mets, in the middle of a global pandemic, could have their second best pitcher need Tommy John surgery. How does that even make any sense? What was this guy doing? Throwing against a wall? Did he have his wife playing catch with him? Like the best person on earth, Garrett Cole? By the way, there's definitely a bromance going on between me and Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole just doesn't know about it. Amy, you're safe. You're a lot better looking than me. But there's definitely a bromance going on. That's all I'm going to say. Boy, that didn't sound creepy at all. I've officially lost my mind about the Jets Now this is just animal instinct, Jacob. Thank God the Sumner interview is taped. Oh man, this is going to be fun. Look, there's no way to overstate the impact that this has on the Mets. They were banking on him to return to his 2016 form, and him and DeGrom were going to be the 1-2 punch that would lead the Mets back to the playoffs. Now, that rotation is DeGrom and blank. Marcus Stroman is not a two-pitcher in this league. Neither is Matz, neither is Porcello, neither is Waka. You can never have too much pitching. Whenever someone says that, that just tells you that they don't know a damn thing about baseball. It always has a way of working itself out. Unfortunately, in the Mets' case, it worked out in a way that resulted in Noah Syndergaard needing Tommy John surgery. And now the question really becomes, will he ever become the pitcher of old again? I don't think he will. For starters, he's not going to get a big deal in free agency. This year, we all know his shot. Next year was going to be his free agent year. Meaning that at the end of the 2021 season, he was going to be a free agent. Syndergaard is only going to pitch, 4 months of that season? How can you give him a big contract based off 4 months? It helps the Mets in the sense that they'll be able to bring him back cheaply, but even then, you can't trust him. Forget health. You can't trust him to be a good pitcher when he comes back. You want to tell me you think he can be a good pitcher? Okay, fine. No guarantee of it. There's been one funny angle to this, though. Matt Harvey is still a free agent. And there are some Mets fans that are saying sign him to a minor league deal. What's the worst that can happen? And you know what? I'm all for it. Don't expect Harvey to be the Dark Knight. I don't think anyone's expecting that, but what's the harm in bringing him in on a minor league deal and having him earn his way back onto the team? Let me ask you something. Who would you rather have in the rotation? Michael Wacha or Matt Harvey? The answer is Matt Harvey. Even Rick Porcello or Matt Harvey. The answer is Matt Harvey. You can do a lot worse than him as a fifth starter if you're the Mets. See what he could do. Bring him in spring training when that resumes. Even if you want to have him start out in the minors. Let him earn his way onto the team. I don't mind that. But I'll tell you, it makes a ton of sense for the Mets to sign Matt Harvey. Moving on now to the national NFL news. And I'll start with Peyton Barber signing with the Redskins for 2 years at $3 million. It's a good move for the Redskins. It makes sense for them. They don't trust Darius Geis. It's just that simple. And how can you? This guy was picked in 2018, and he's only played 5 games in the NFL. It's sad. It's really unfortunate. I like Geis. He has talent. That's undeniable. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how talented you are. If you're hurt, you can't show it. Barber's a decent running back. He's not great, but he's not terrible. Him and Ronald Jones were 1A, 1B. Jones was more 1A. And look, neither one of them set the world on fire. I'm not a big Ronald Jones fan. No one's going to be mistaking him for Cadillac Williams anytime soon. But Barber makes sense to be the backup to Adrian Peterson. Like I said yesterday, the Redskins' offense will be fine. It's their defense that's going to struggle. You have to hope that Ron Rivera can whip some guys into shape. Moving on now to the Jaguars signing Rashawn Melvin for 1 year at $2.25 million. And it makes sense. They traded Boye, they traded Ramsey last year. The only good corner they had going into free agency was DJ Hayden. And even then, Hayden's just a slot corner. Put him on the outside and he's not as effective. They added Darqueze Dennard, which was a good move. Melvin didn't have a good year last year for the Lions, but he's been really effective before. He was really good for the Colts. Like, really, really good for them. So to bring him in on a 1-year prove-it deal makes sense. If you want to have him starting, I'm not crazy about it. I'd like him better as the fourth corner. But you can get away with it because he's been so good in the past. Regardless, though, I fully expect the Jaguars to draft at least one cornerback in a month. Moving on now to the Falcons, locking up Allen Bailey for 1 year at $4.5 million. And that's a really good move for the Falcons. That makes a ton of sense. Bailey was really good with the Chiefs. He signed with the Falcons. He's probably regretting that. But he had a good year for the Falcons last year. And he was even starting a little bit for him. And he was effective. 64 overall grade last year, according to Pro Football Focus. He makes a ton of sense as a rotational defensive lineman. Even if you wanted to have him start 16 games, I don't hate it. Bailey's a good player in this league. The last piece of NFL news that I want to talk about today concerns the Jaguars signing Tyler Eifert. It is finally official. He is getting $15.5 million over 2 years. And look, it makes sense for the Jaguars to bring him in. They needed a tight end desperately. James O'Shaughnessy is not good, and Josh Oliver was hurt. Here's the thing, though. Eifert's incredibly injury prone. So why wouldn't you just roll with Oliver? Can you seriously say that Tyler Eifert is better than Josh Oliver? I gotta tell you, I really liked Josh Oliver coming out of San Jose State last year. And this is the first year in Eifert's career that he's played 16 games. And you're giving him $7.25 million per year? How does that make any sense? Is Eifert even that talented? Tyler Eifert only has one good year in his whole career. He's been in the NFL for 7 seasons. And the only good year he's ever had is 2015. Now, it was a really good year, and he looked like he was going to be a special player for a long time, but he's always been hurt. Granted, last year he stayed healthy, but he didn't exactly set the world on fire. 43 catches for 436 yards and 3 touchdowns? That's not great. I gotta tell you, Josh Oliver can do that. You want to roll with Eifert and Oliver? I guess that's okay. I don't mind that. But Oliver's a lot more important to the Jaguars than Eifert is. Look, it makes sense for the Jaguars to bring him in, give Minshew as many weapons as he can, but I just don't want Oliver to be set aside for Eifert. I don't mind a 1A, 1B setup, it's just that I'm high on Oliver, was high on him last year, and I think he can still be a really good NFL player. Alright, here's my exclusive interview with Jim Sumner. You are listening to the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I am fortunate enough to be talking to Jim Sumner, the author of Tales from the Duke Blue Devils Locker Room, a collection of the greatest Duke basketball stories ever told. Jim, how are you?
I am doing well under the circumstances. How about you?
Yeah, I'm surviving. certainly trying to keep a level head with there being no sports, but I'm surviving. I think that's the best way to say it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to run a sports business with no sports.
No question. A lot of evergreen stuff is what I'm pulling out right now.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to be talking to you. This will be a lot of fun. It'll certainly be great content. So any Duke interview has to start with Mike Krzyzewski. What are some things that we don't know about him?
Oh, well, I'm not sure there's anything anybody doesn't know. He's been pretty well documented. I think he's probably the most competitive person I've ever been around. He simply hates to lose. It's interesting to see over the years, I think he has realized that he is kind of the face of college basketball. So any post-game interview, the first thing he does is compliment the other team, how well coached they are, how well they ran their offense. He is, at times when he's furious with the outcome of a game, he always takes a high road. I think he realizes he has a lot of responsibility. If you believe Mike Krzyzewski, there are an enormous number of really good coaches out there because everybody Duke plays. They can beat somebody by 60 points. First thing he does is compliment the coaching and the players, how hard the other team played, how well coached they were, how they ran their offense, and how well they ran their schemes, that sort of thing. So I think he's changed. I don't know if he's changed internally over the years, but he's changed externally simply because I think he realizes he's in a position that he wasn't in when he started out.
Yeah, no question about that. So can you tell us a few stories of the 1990-91 and 1991-92 teams? Yeah, well,
I can tell you a lot. Every time you have in 1990, Duke played UNLV in the national title game and lost by 30 points. Just got absolutely drubbed.
Steamrolled by the Running Rebels.
Yeah, the Running Rebels, Larry Johnson, Stacey Ogwin.
Tarkanian, yeah.
Yeah, Greg Anthony, all those guys.
Right.
That team had 3 senior starters who were all pretty good college players. One of them, Al Abdenabi, was from Bloomfield, New Jersey, up in your neck of the woods. And this was this is just before the Fab Five came on board. And, of course, the Fab Five kind of changed our perception of what a freshman-dominated team can do. But back in those days, experience was valued. So a team that lost 3 senior starters would clearly be in a rebuilding mode. And, of course, that wasn't the case. But a couple of things, talking about Mike Krzyzewski, one of the pivotal games in early January, we're talking about the 1990-91 season, Duke went to Charlottesville to play the University of Virginia and got beat pretty badly, 81-64, I believe. And it was just a dismal performance, a Saturday on regional TV. This is before ESPN broadcast everything. ESPN was in its infancy, so a lot of games that were on TV were local. They weren't on TV at all. But anyway, he was so furious when he got off the bus in Durham, he called practice. And, I mean, this is right after they had played a game. And it's you guys didn't burn up enough energy to be tired. So it was the kind of practice where, one's manhood was questioned. And Grant Hill was a freshman on that team. He ended up breaking his nose. They were, it was like, you better play hard, you better practice hard. So he ends up breaking his nose. But that game kind of turned the season around, kind of set a tone. Duke ended up winning the regular season championship. They went to Chapel Hill to play North Carolina. North Carolina was ranked 4th. I think Duke was ranked 7th or 8th. Both teams were tied for first place in the ACC. So Duke won that game to win the regular season championship. But a week later, they played the Tar Heels in the ACC tournament title game and got beat by 22 points. So the team comes into the locker room after just not only getting drilled, but getting drilled by their arch rivals. And they expect Krzyzewski to come in and just blast them. So he comes in and says, guys, everybody's got one bad game in them. this was our bad game. 3 weeks from now, we're going to be cutting down the nets, which was just not what they expected. It was an interesting way to go into the postseason. So to go to the postseason, they're seeded second in the Midwest. North Carolina seeded first in the East. So there's some resentment. Duke had won 2 of the 3 games they had met, and they kind of thought, maybe we deserve to be in the East. The East finals, I believe, were in the Meadowlands in New Jersey, which is kind of a place that Duke has always played very well. There's a sizable Duke alumni contingent in the greater New York City area, so whenever Duke plays in the Meadowlands or Madison Square Garden, they tend to get, it tends to be almost, unless they're playing St. John's, it's a home court advantage for them because they really promote those games to the greater New York City alumni base. So they kind of start off with a chip on their shoulder, but looming over everything was the giant shadow of UNLV. They were undefeated going into the tournament. They had only had 1 game that was even a single-digit victory. They beat Arkansas by something like 9 points in Arkansas. That was the only game they had that was even remotely close. So everybody just figured we're going through the motions. We can go ahead and give the tournament to UNLV. So they come in. Duke actually they get a little bit of a break. They're seeded number 2. Ohio State seeded number 1. St. John's upsets Ohio State. This is a St. John's team that had Malik Sealy and Robert Burdan. It was good. It was when they were very good. It wasn't as good as the Chris Mullin, Mark Jackson teams. So it was a pretty good team. And Duke beats them in the Midwest Finals 78-61, and then they see Las Vegas is in the Final Four, and because everybody expects Vegas to beat Duke and beat anybody else, and so what Krzyzewski had to do going into that game was really convince. He kind of did a rope-a-dope thing. Every public utterance he made was, wow, this is an NBA team. I don't see how anybody can stay with them. There's no way we can defend Larry Johnson. There's no way we can guard Stacey Augmon. I don't know why we even bothered showing up, but every time when he got his team together, he's saying, we're going to beat these guys, and this is how. And he put together a plan to beat UNLV, and that's exactly the way it turned out. One of the things he did was he convinced Duke, and this is the way it turned out, that UNLV's greatness is almost like some kind of martial arts thing where you use your enemy's strength against them. He convinced them that their great season would work against them because they hadn't played any close games. We've played lots of close games. We live for close games. If they get into a close game, they're not going to know what to do. And that's exactly what happened. They got into a close game. They had a shot clock violation. Greg Anthony fouled out. Duke made the big plays down the stretch and pulled off the upset. So kind of a psychological, a great job of psych job by Krzyzewski. The one thing a lot of people forget about that game is it wasn't for the championship. It was actually the semifinal game. So if you've ever seen the end of that game where the last desperation Vegas shot is missed, Bobby Hurley grabs the rebound, and you see Krzyzewski, and there's great celebration. The Duke fans and cheerleaders, players are all jumping up and down. Krzyzewski goes down the court and he holds his hands down. Calm down. Yeah, we've got another game to play. So.
Yeah, and that just speaks to the great motivator that Krzyzewski is. There's just something about him. He's able to lead these young men better than anyone ever has. For my money, he's the best college coach ever. And he has this thing where sometimes he won't let the players into the locker room if they're playing like garbage on a specific day. I just think that's great.
Yeah, he hasn't done that sort of thing recently. It's like, when people ask me what makes Krzyzewski so successful, I'll say, well, he's very smart, he's very well organized, he has great time management skills, but more than anything else, he has this ability to articulate a vision and get people to buy into that vision. It's hard to really articulate. Let me give an example. That same year we were talking about, 1990, 1991, Duke had a senior named Greg Kubek, who is from upstate New York, another, I want to say Clifford Park. 6'4", he's a McDonald's All-American who he was a good college player, but he was a complimentary player. He never quite, at one point, when he was recruited out of high school, he's a right-handed Chris Mullin. Well, no, he wasn't a right-handed Chris Mullin. I'm not sure there have been too many other Chris Mullins.
No, definitely not.
His senior year, Duke brings in Grant Hill, and Kubek, all of a sudden, he's not playing at all. He's a senior, he's co-captain, and he's actually thinking about going home at Christmas and quitting the team, not coming back. So he says, I'm going to have one more meeting with Coach K and see what happens. And he goes in, he's expecting a sympathy. He's expecting he's going to complain, he's going to whine, he's going to say, I deserve this, I deserve that. And she says she's going to put his shoulder around, around his shoulder and say, oh, Greg, it'll be okay. But what Krzyzewski does is he says, okay, you think you'll be playing? Here's the roster. Here's Grant Hill. Are you playing better than Grant Hill? Kubek goes, well, no, not really. Are you playing better than Thomas Hill? No. Are you playing better than Billy McCaffrey? No. Are you playing better than Brian Davis? No. And he just went and said, you want to get on the court, you got to play better than these guys. I've got 200 player minutes to allocate, and you aren't earning it. You aren't playing well enough to earn. So anyway, he rededicates himself to his team, to his craft, to himself. He goes out and he works hard, and he ends up the season starting. In fact, he scored the first 5 points of the national championship game, but against Kansas. There's this whole thing about successful leaders know who and when and where somebody needs a pat on the back and when somebody needs a kick in the butt. Krzyzewski is a master of that. He always seems to know what his team as a team and the individual that team need at a time. Do they need encouragement? Do they need tough love? Do they need to come into the locker room and find that their names have been taken up off their lockers, or does he need to, what happened at the end of, after they lost to North Carolina, we're going to be cutting down the nets. He just seems to have a sense for what folks need at that particular time.
Now, what about 91, 92? I combined the two because they were similar rosters.
Yeah, they lost a couple of, they lost Kubek, they lost a couple of transfers. They brought in a couple of big players from California. So the thing about, you're talking about that UNLV game. That was, excuse me, that was the last time Duke ever played a basketball game as the lovable underdogs.
Right.
After that, they came in 91, 92, they were kind of rock stars. You either loved them or hated them. More people loved that team than any Duke team ever. More people hated that team than ever. But nobody, if you followed college basketball, you were not neutral. That team had a particular swagger about it. They actually came pretty close to going undefeated. Bobby Hurley, who was, of course, from New Jersey. Arguably the two best players of that team were from Christian Laettner from upstate New York and Hurley from Jersey City. From New Jersey was Bob Hurley Sr., legendary preps coach. And they had a certain kind of swagger about them. They just kind of intimidated the other teams, and they were undefeated when they went to Chapel Hill to play a very good North Carolina team, and they were ahead at half, and Hurley broke his right foot. He landed, he went up for layup, and he landed on somebody's foot, and he kept playing, but they ended up losing that game by 2, and then they lost one other game to Wake Forest with him out, and then he comes back, and they run the table. So conceivably they would have been undefeated if Hurley doesn't break his foot. But obviously the Kentucky game, I don't know what to possibly say about that. That hasn't already been said. arguably the most publicized college basketball game of all time. But of course, we're talking about the attitude and the swagger. A lot of people talk about Christian Laettner's stomp of Aminu Timberlake in that game. It really, if you look at it, it wasn't a stomp; it was a tap, but it was like a dominance thing. It's like, I've got you down on your back, and I'm the king kind of thing. That was just kind of the attitude that team had. They just assumed anytime they wanted to, they could push a button and turn it on, and they were off to the races.
Talking to Jim Sumner, the author of Tales from the Duke Blue Devils Locker Room, a collection of the greatest Duke basketball stories ever told. So we'll fast forward to Duke's next title. Would you be able to lay out some tales about the 2000-2001 team?
Well, of course, that was the team that they had. Excuse me. In 1999, Duke had a team that lost in the title game to Connecticut. That was one of the great college basketball teams ever. And after that, a game that Duke was favored to win. They went in with a 37-1 record. And after that, for the first time ever, Duke started losing players early to the NBA. Elton Brand, Corey Maggette, and Elton Brand, another local guy, he's from Peekskill. Corey Maggette and William Avery all left for the NBA early. And so they kind of had, for the first time, she had to rebuild with players, replacing players he didn't expect to rebuild. So 2 years later, he's got Shane Battier, who's a senior, arguably the best player in the country, and some really good sophomores, including Jason Williams, who's a New Jersey guy, and Carlos Boozer and Mike Dunleavy. These are all guys who came in as freshmen expecting to be complementary players on a team with Brand, Maggette, and Avery, and all of a sudden they were thrown into the kind of roles that freshmen have now that they didn't necessarily have in 2000. So it's kind of an unusual team in the sense that it wasn't put together it was the first time she said she had put together a team in a non-traditional where guys weren't staying for 4 years. He had holes to fill. And the season hit a roadblock late in the year. Duke was playing Maryland when Maryland was as much a rival as North Carolina. They had really good players. The Maryland team that would win the national championship in 2002. So Carlos Boozer is a sophomore center, and he breaks a foot against the Terps. It's the regular season finale, and it looks like that could be the end of Duke's season. So Krzyzewski completely retools the team almost overnight. Their next game is on the road against a very good North Carolina team, a team that had been in the Final Four the year before. So he retools the team. He inserts a freshman named Chris Duhon into the starting lineup. He replaces Boozer with Casey Sanders, who's a skinny guy who can run, and all of a sudden he turns them into a fast break pressing team. Carlos Boozer, of course, had a long and productive NBA career. He was a back to the basket in the blocks, low post power player. And she said, we aren't going to do that. So he completely retooled the team. They beat North Carolina decisively in Chapel Hill. They won the ACC tournament, and they go into the NCAA tournament with kind of a completely different team with Shane Battier and Jason Williams as arguably the two best players in the country, and they eventually get Boozer back, and they play Maryland in the Final Four. It was the fourth game of a really kind of a remarkable series that Duke and Maryland had that year. Duke had won earlier in the year in College Park, the game where they were 8 points behind with less than minutes to play, come back and win that game. Then Maryland goes to Durham and wins the game there that Boozer broke his foot, or Boozer broke his foot, whatever you. The became the Booster Bucks. But then they played in the ACC tournament semifinals. Duke won on a tip-in by Nate James, who's now one of Krzyzewski's assistant coaches. Won a tip-in at the buzzer. So this is the fourth time they've played this year. So yeah, there aren't a lot of surprises. They kind of know each other, and Maryland just jumps all over Duke. They're ahead. They're I think 39-17 at the first. I mean, in the first half, and it's like, what? Krzyzewski calls out and says, "Okay, we aren't going to call any more plays. Just go out and play basketball." And they come back, and they come all the way back and win the game. Then they play Arizona and Lou Dawson in the national championship game and pull it off. But that's just an example of Krzyzewski's ability. In some respects, he can be stubborn, but he has one of his assets is his adaptability. He can change if he's got a team of big low post guys. He'll slow it down and he'll force it inside. If he's got a team, a small undersized team, they'll be a running, trapping, pressing team. You talk about his national title team. The 2010 team didn't have a lot of depth and athleticism, so he completely changed his aggressive man-to-man defense into something resembling what Tony Bennett has done in Virginia. Just pack it in, don't challenge on the perimeter, and he won with a couple of guys from New Jersey in the starting lineup, Brian Zubek and Lance Thomas, but it's a completely different team than he had, say, in the early 90s. He has the ability to adapt to his personnel, to the competition, that I think is kind of an understated part of his arsenal.
Yeah, no question about that. You took the next question out of my mouth about the 09-10 team, so we'll skip over that. Can you tell us some stories of the 2014-15 team?
Well, that was of the trend lines in that decade is the development of one-and-done kind of freshman players.
Which I hate.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up when people like David Thompson and Bill Walton played, through their season.
And they were there forever.
I mean, really. So you don't have you don't have a lot. Yeah, but that's the way it is. But going in that Duke had Corey Maggette left after 1 year after 1999. Lowell Ding after 2004. Kyrie Irving after 2011. Austin Rivers after 2012. So it was scattered. You have other guys who would leave after 2 years, after 3 years, but the one and done phenomena was just kind of coming in. That was the year he started 3 freshmen, all of whom went to the NBA after that year: Jahlil Okafor, Justice Winslow, and Tyus Jones. And that was another example of his ability to adapt. Okafor was a big, is a big, strong, back to the basket, low post power player, and he started. A returning post player named Emil Jefferson started alongside Okafor, and it made sense when Jefferson was a good player. He's been in and out of the NBA for the last few years. He goes to the G League and absolutely dominates, but hasn't been able to translate that into a substantial NBA career. But anyway, at some point during the season, she just decided the best way to maximize Okafor was to surround him with 4 guys who can handle the ball and shoot, forget traditional positions. So he moved a freshman, Justice Winslow, 6'6", from small forward to power forward, so he could get he could surround Okafor with 4 ball handlers and 4 shooters. Just another example of his ability to adapt, his flexibility, and that's been one of his characteristics. if somebody said he doesn't have positions, that's a little bit overstated because he has more positional flexibility than most coaches. He'll just say, I want to get, I recruit players. So he's the kind of guy, he'll have a 6'5" power forward if that's the best way to get his 5 best players on the floor. In 2015, it was kind of a chaotic season. A player named Rashid Suleiman was kicked off the team at midseason, and he had another player transfer at midseason. So all of a sudden he's got a very, very thin roster. He basically got 8 recruited players that he's trying to massage through a difficult ACC schedule, and so he has to adapt, and they're able to kind of retool the team at mid-season, and there they are cutting down the nets.
Talking to Jim Sumner, the author of Tales from the Duke Blue Devils Locker Room, a collection of the greatest Duke basketball stories ever told. So let's go to some dominant Duke players now. Would you be able to lay out a few tales about Zion Williamson?
Well, the story that obviously, the highlight reel of highlight reels. But I go back to one of the first times we actually saw Zion Williamson play was an exhibition game. You get a couple of exhibition games before the season. So you're playing some, if you're at Duke's level, you play the exhibition game, you beat somebody by 50 or 60 points. Duke's playing one, and it's in the second half, and the other team has the ball, and there's a deflection, and the ball's knocked into the backcourt. And this happened right in front of me where I'm sitting on press row. And there are 2 players from the other team. Actually, I'm drawing a blank, even though the team was, but anyway.
Podunk University.
Ferris State, okay?
Okay.
Ferris State. Duke's ahead by 51 points. So anyway, the ball's knocked into the backcourt. There's 2 Ferris State players getting ready to pick it up from the offense. Zion Williamson's 20 feet away. He comes sprinting in like a freight train, jumps on the floor, creates a held ball. The possessioner, I think, is pointing Duke's way. It's kind of irrelevant, but it's an exhibition game. You're 50 points ahead. You're Zion Williamson, who's kind of got to protect his body, and he's still going to. I mean, that impressed me more than any of the dunks, any of the highlight reel plays. Just showing that's kind of the way you're taught to play at Duke. You don't take plays off. You contest everything. Even if you're Zion Williamson and you're ahead by 50 points. It says something about Zion Williamson too, because that's not said. He basically said, well, "Why would I not? I'm going to play hard every second." So that play impressed me. For some reason, that impressed me more than anything else he did at Duke.
Yeah, and certainly Zion's a guy who has all the talent in the world. He just needs to protect his body a little bit more. He's a little susceptible to injuries. Of course, he had the weird thing with his shoe, and he had a delayed start to his Pelicans career. But if he stays healthy, there's nothing stopping him from being a perennial all-star in the NBA.
Yeah.
So I'm going to travel back in time with you a little bit. I'm going to throw out a couple names you probably haven't heard in years. Are you ready?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Can you tell us a few stories about Jeff Mullins?
Jeff Mullins was a 6'4" forward for Duke. He was the ACC Player of the Year in 1964. He was Duke's first Olympic basketball player, played on the team that went to Tokyo. A very kind of smooth player, very efficient 6'4" forward. Had a very long, successful NBA career with Golden State. He actually, if you look at a roster of Jeff, you see that he is listed as being from Lexington, Kentucky. So everybody said, well, how did he get away from Adolph Rupp? Not entirely true. He actually grew up in Astoria, New York. Excuse me. His father worked for IBM and was moved from IBM to Lexington. IBM moved him from Astoria to Lexington when Jeff was in high school. So he didn't grow up dreaming of playing for Adolph Rupp, but still he was in Kentucky. Great high school player. The Kentucky actually put him up, had him meet with the governor of the state of Kentucky to convince him to stay home and play for Kentucky. And what Jeff told me was it was nothing under the table or anything. It was just kind of, you stay in Kentucky and you become a hero. After you graduate, there are all these opportunities. You want to run for office or open a business, you'll be a legend. But when Jeff was a junior, there was a senior on the team named John Speaks, who was about 6'1", a guard, very highly regarded player. And Kentucky had recruited Speaks, and they're in the gym for practice. After practice, Rupp comes in and tells Speaks, I've decided to offer you a scholarship, son. Come to Kentucky. And Speaks, I'm paraphrasing here basically. Well, thanks, Coach Rupp. That's quite an honor. I'd like a day or two to think about it. And Rupp went ballistic on him. Nobody turns down Adolph Rupp. Nobody. How many kids there are in Kentucky who'd just love to get an offer from me? You don't think about that. So he just went, he withdrew the offer. Speaks went to NC State, where he was an all-ACC player. But Mullins remembered that. He was a year behind Speaks. He was a junior when Speaks was a senior. But he remembered that when it became his senior and it was kind of crunch time for him to make a decision. He remembered the way that Adolph Rupp had treated John Speaks, and that was one of the reasons he decided he was just did not want to play for that man.
Talking to Jim Sumner, the author of Tales from the Duke Blue Devils Locker Room, a collection of the greatest Duke basketball stories ever told. And, Jim, I'll get you out on this, another old-timer. What can you tell us about Bob Verga?
Seagirt, New Jersey.
Yep.
A shooter.
Great shooter. Had a good ABA career.
Yeah, good ABA career. And some of it around here with the Carolina Cougars. He was at Duke in the mid-late 60s, graduated in 1967. He set the single-season scoring record at Duke in 1967. That is still the second best. It held up until J.J. Redick broke it in 2006. And this is an era before the shot clock, before the three-point shot. If there had been a three-point shot, he would have probably averaged 30 points a game. He averaged 26 as a senior. A couple of things about Verga. His junior year was the team that Vic Bubas always said was his best team. Verga started at guard. There was a guy named Mike Lewis was the center. He led the ACC in rebounding. Jack Marin was probably the best all-around player on the team. He was forward. Very, very, very good team. And the week after Duke won, you had to win the ACC tournament to get the automatic. Only one team could go per conference in the ACC. You had to win the tournament. So Duke won the ACC tournament, getting ready to play Kentucky in the Final Four, and Verga comes up with strep throat. And he played against Kentucky, but he didn't. I think he scored 4 points. He didn't. He was shot, and of course this was the year that Kentucky won that game 83-79. They lost to Texas Western, the game that's become famous ever since as the game with the Texas Western started 5 black players against 5 white Kentucky players, and all the implications of that. And I've always kind of wondered if Duke had been that team instead of Kentucky, would the narrative have changed? They had, they were still a Southern team. There were no African American players. They had one African American player on the freshman team, and it started to recruit African-American players, so maybe the narrative would have been different with Vic Bubas and Duke than it was with Adolph Rupp in Kentucky. But that's always been one of those interesting what-if stories. But anyway, Verga came from money. His father was a physician. He drove a fancy sports car, and he didn't really hang out with the rest of his team. So his senior year, 1966-67, Duke lost the game on New Year's Eve to Wake Forest, and most of the team went out to a bar or to commiserate, and Verga wasn't invited and didn't go along. Big Bubas found out they had violated the curfew, so he suspended all these guys for their next game, which was against Penn State. But Verga and a couple of scholarship players who didn't play much and some walk-ons were the only guys that played against Penn State. And Verga had 38 points, and Duke won, I think, 89-84. And just as so, the fact that Verga was kind of I'm not sure, kind of a loner, actually played to Duke's advantage. And Verga's an interesting. He's just really he hasn't really stayed close to Duke. He's hard to get up with. I've never been able to get up with him. His jersey number is not retired at Duke, and I've always thought that maybe if he had stayed close to the program, it would have been entirely different. But
it should be retired. He was a hell of a player.
Yeah.
You're the best, Jim. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, great Step.
All right, that was Jim Sumner. His book is Tales from the Duke Blue Devils Locker Room, a collection of the greatest Duke basketball stories ever told. Thanks for listening. Here comes the outro.
Thanks for the plug, Jacob from the past. It does mean a lot. Tomorrow, I'm going to keep the college basketball theme up with an exclusive interview that I did with Tim Rooney, who wrote a book about John Beilein at Michigan. I think you'll enjoy it. I had a good time talking to him. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that when I was in a milking contest, I didn't try too hard. I was afraid that I'd get emotionally involved with the cow.